Hi, and welcome to Bite-Sized Bat Reps, where we bring you great battle reports without taking up a great deal of your time. So I'm back with By Fire and Sword, and this time I finally had a chance to play a TaskForce beta game. So if you haven't heard, these are some new rules for a different level of the game that Wargamer is putting out, and the English version isn't available yet, but I have access to the Polish version, and so we played it with a friend of mine here, and here's what it looks like. I played my Sweden versus the Crimean Khanate, and that's because even though I have Ottoman skirmish force, that's pretty big. It's actually full. That's not quite enough to field a task force, so Sweden's the only force that I can field, and that's why I put them out there. The battlefield looked like this, so let's start from the top. I'll spend a little bit more time talking about the rules and what's different with this level versus the regular skirmish or division games. So first of all, the scenario is a version on of take and hold, where you have 3 hills and they're all worth 2 points each. Unlike in the skirmish version, where there's a hill and 2 kind of extra points, you actually have 3 hills. But the main difference in how the game starts is that there is now this new pre-game phase called the Reconnaissance Phase, or Turn 0, or whatever the name will be, where your Vanguard units get a single turn mini-game before the game starts to kind of seed the deployment and see how the game will begin. And the Vanguard units are part of the army list, so for Swedes it's Dragoons are right there, so I had some 4 Dragoons, and Tatars had some Tatar warriors. And the way the turn works is you first designate 2 reconnaissance lines, which are basically 20 centimeters apart, and then you have to set up your vanguard on that line anywhere. And then I think it's randomly determined who goes first. So I plopped my Dragoons here with their order because I want to take this hill and make sure that it doesn't get kind of force marked and taken over by the Tatars before I even get there. And my opponent put his warriors on his line, just outside of the main central hill. And then you play 1 turn. So yeah, here's a close-up of my Dragoons, and at this point the order is still hidden because that's before the turn gets executed, and my opponent's warriors. And then we played 1 glorious turn, and so I obviously had a defend order, and so I was covering the approach in case the Tatars would be charging. My opponent put in a move order, and so he was able to get onto this hill, and the turn is over. And what happens now is you figure out how much reconnaissance you generate from this, and that's a mix of the bases that are still in the field and how this turn actually went. And I ended up with enough points to have like a forced march, and my opponent ended up with enough for an ambush and a forced march. And then we go on to the actual turn 1 and setting up the rest of the army. But as you can see, the reconnaissance forces remain where they are, and that's kind of cool because then the game begins with something having already happened there. So you get the sense that the armies don't just show up and start fighting in this like pristine battlefield, but there's a pre-story to this game. So we already had this encounter, and there's something that seeded it, and now the rest of the armies show up. So I thought that was kind of cool. Now, one important thing to mention right off the bat, going to come clean, that we actually forgot to apply the difference in effects between our 2 forces. My force is 22 points, so this is 22 points of Swedes, and I'm facing 18 points of Tatars. And we were so concerned with getting that first turn 0 correctly and reading up about how it works exactly that we totally forgot to roll for the effects. So the game isn't fair, and so just yeah, it's still nicely shows how the whole system works, but just to let you know, I cheated a bit accidentally. There you go. So setup is as like this with the 3 points, and let's go through what is in each of the forces. So one of the cool things about the new army lists is from the skirmish is that you get to see units that you normally wouldn't see. Like you have Tatar infantry, the Kapikulu, which is kind of cool because I don't think I've actually ever seen these guys on the table, and I fought the Tatars a lot. So my opponent brings some Capicula on the far right, or his far right flank, warriors, a Yasser, then some rabble, the scouting warriors that are occupying the hill, more rabble, more Capiculu, and then he has elite Tatars on the side here, general, I think 2 other commanders, and then another Yasser. And the other thing about these forces is that they're not as flexible or elite. No, yeah, I shouldn't say that, but they do force you to take some units that maybe you wouldn't be taking it on as with the skirmish, where, for example, he has to take a lot of warriors to be able to finally get to the better elite units. And Yasser is another cool figurine that you don't usually see in skirmish, but it's kind of nice to see it on the table because it's really unique, different, and kind of brings something else to how the game plays. All right, on my side, I have 6 raiders, musketeers, the dragoons that are scouting that are on the hill, commander here. Then I have veteran musketeers, a gun, another gun, and some more musketeers. And then this is a supply wagon. It's not an ammunition wagon, so I can't actually take ammunition from this. The wagon actually can't really do anything in the game, but buying it allows you to get more upgrades for your army. So that's the other new fun dynamic they added, or rule, where you buy your army with force points as always, but all of the upgrades, like for the Swedes, it's armor and arquebuses, and certain commanders cost supply points, and supply points are very, very limited. And one of the ways to get more supply points is to buy this wagon. And the downside of buying the wagon is that it then has to sit on the field, and it's this target where the enemy can kill it and kind of cause problems for your army. So it's kind of neat, because then if you have a really decked out force with all kinds of upgrades, it also has built-in disadvantages like this wagon that just sits there and is a target. So that was kind of cool. Going on, I have on the right side, I have 2 units of armored veterans. So this is the best cavalry that Swedes can field, and it's one of the better cavalries in the game. But in order to get to these, I had to go through a lot of these musketeers and other units that maybe I wouldn't want to take. So that's the other cool thing about the scenarios that builder is that to get these kind of great units, you have to bring in other units, which forces a bit more army composition. So I put them on the right side, and then I have another set of dragoons on the far right, just so that they can kind of advance and screen my raiders. And this is the table from a different angle, so you can see that I compacted my forces with a pretty standard deployment of raiders on the sides to provide kind of flanking movement, and infantry and guns in the center to move up and own this part of the table with firepower. And my opponent spread his forces in a thin line, with infantry being able to advance on the sides, take the hill, and these elite Tatars on the far flank there can come in and flank. And then he also put, I think, 4 or 5 bases into ambush, so they'll pop up somewhere later on in the game. We now go on to before turn 1, so the Reconnaissance Effects and Force Marches. So my opponent force marches his infantry into the light woods, and I force march my veterans up towards the middle of the table so I can get going sooner. Now, the thing that I really liked about this level, or this new rules, is that both sides get a chance to use Reconnaissance Effects, and I think that's really fun, because in the traditional skirmish game, one side wins Reconnaissance, has more points, and then gets to spend on fun effects, and the other side just sits there and takes it. And it's kind of frustrating, especially when you're playing with armies that always lose Reconnaissance. You never get to play with that part of the game. But here, I lost Reconnaissance, and my opponent had more things he could do. He did an ambush and a force march, but I still got to do my little force march, and so I still felt like there was something I could think about and be tactical about. So that's a really good change. I'm very happy they did this. Kicking things off, turn 1, the Tatars move up, and so infantry gets into the forest, or the light woods. The lines kind of move up in the center here, and the elite Tatars start circling around, and the hill is still in... the warriors advance on the hill and just kind of start getting ready to defend it with their bows. On my side, I move my infantry up, and kind of spread the them out a little bit so that they can be effective in fighting or in shooting. The armored elite, the steel and gunpowder line, moves up and gets ready to take the hill. And the Rangers on the left side as well move up a little bit. And then another look at the the wall of steel that I'm advancing on the right side. We go into shooting, and this is where the Capicule really impressed me. This is so funny. It's like they have a long range, so they have 35 centimeter range, so that's they're the longest kind of range for regular shooting. And they just sniped me with 2 wounds. So right off the bat, 2 wounds, because I think I rolled a 0, so the Swedes have that small companies rule. And so I almost lose a base right away to the super long range gunfire from the Tatters. Did not expect this. Really fun to see that the army plays so differently than the skirmish force. And this is what end of turn 1 looks like. We go on to turn 2, and turn 2 is my initiative. So I move up with my Raiders and expand their frontage, because now I want to threaten the Tatars here and chase them off so they don't just destroy my Dragoons with bows. Infantry marches up. The Raiders get ready to maybe go up the hill or defend from the Tatars. And Tatars here are obviously circling around, so that's very dangerous. So I'm really being careful so that I don't get flank charge or side charged. And then my Dragoons here push into the light wood so that and dismount but keep a horse guard, because now these woods are in nice defensive position, so I'm reinforcing it. Close up in the hill. And some shooting opens up now from both sides. And you can see that the Tatars are setting up for a nice charge next turn. And they're far enough that this is way too far for me to make in a charge, because they'll just break off, or as light cavalry withdraw and then come back into me. So there's this kind of like no man's land right now between the 2 cavalry forces, which is why I wanted these Dragoons to be in the light woods, because they can kind of move up to the edge and start providing some fire and scaring off the Tatars. Because these elite warriors are no joke. With they have spears, they have elite cavalry, so they have a really punchy charge. A journal's eye view of the hill that they're all trying to fight for. Just commanding his infantry forward. And so my infantry now is basically defending, and they're just doing the maneuver and then counter march. So they're just slowly kind of edging up and firing 1 rank at a time. And the left side. So the warriors on the hill are in a nice defensive position, but they're open for my cannons, and they take a wound from the case shot that comes from the cannon. Lose, I think you actually even lose a base, and fail the morale test and withdraw disorganized. So the hill's now wide open, and these guys are in a little bit of trouble because they have to rally before they can be useful, which is huge for my Raiders, because now they're not surrounded on kind of all 3 sides. They only have these 2 units to deal with, and that's much more manageable. So end of the turn looks like this, or end of the defensive shooting phase. So the hill is wide open now. But the Capicule keep shooting, and again, their crazy marksmanship carries. They knock out a base, and I'm sitting on 2 wounds and minus a base, and have to test morale, and fail. So they actually get disorganized, and my Rangers withdraw, because they were not expecting this like eagle-eyed sharpshooter fire from the light woods. They're fighting, horse archers. What's with this excellent musketry? So they're confused and they withdraw. And this is the end of the turn. So my left flank is disorganized. The hill's open because my opponent's warriors are disorganized, and there's this no man's land here. And at the end of the turn, the Tatars spring their traps, so the ambush shows up on the left side, and this is really worrisome to me because I've got some disorganized raiders here. The hill's wide open, so this is not looking good. But then we realized that the ambush was actually illegal because you can't place units in the opponent's deployment zone or that close to the edge. So you couldn't place them there, and so you had to place them on the right side, which is much better for me because, yes, they're still an ambush. Yes, they're still threatening, but I've got some good defensive units here and good order raiders, so that was that was kind of funny. Double ambush. All right, turn 3 kicks off, and I get the initiative again. My raiders on the left side rally, so they are ready to do something. Infantry pushes up into the hill and expands and goes into defense. So now I've got these nice lines that can start firing or keep firing, supported by guns. Nice staggered line, so even if something gets charged or breaks, it's not going to be all of them at the same time. And then my wall of steel raiders can now turn to face the threat from the right side, because these guys are have rallied, but they don't have an order, and so by the time they get to the hill, like it's fine. I have a turn or two where I can basically turn to face and face this threat. Close up on the hill. And the right side is I get ready. Now when my opponent's turn, he moves his cavalry up to get ready for charges. So again, I guess he didn't feel like charging that turn, and so he just boxes me in even more. Infantry slowly counter marching towards the hill, and the rabble moves up. And in shooting phase, they'll take fire from basically all of these black powder weapons. Shot before the end, before the shooting starts. And they do take a wound from the case shot, and so they test and they fail their morale, and they disorganize and fall back. So they kind of scouted up and just took a lot of fire from all kinds of angles and decided that that's not good, and withdrew. And the turn looks like this. And turn 4 starts, and this is where everything happens. So the rabble rallies and gets a charge order, and these musketeers, the veterans, brace for impact, and they'll be firing a salvo into the charging cavalry. And they'll be supported by the other musketeers in the gun and the musketeers in the hill, so there's a lot of fire coming into them from all kinds of angles. And on the right side, the warriors move up onto the hill to take it, and the rabble and the elites storm into my wall of steel. Fortunately, the rabble is too far, so they don't make the charge yet. They'll make it in the follow-up move, but I have time to maneuver, whereas these warriors these raiders do get charged and contacted, so they can't do anything anymore. And of course, the ambush is showing its strength, and the ambushing warriors circle from the right side behind the light woods, and so they can catch. If I lose this combat, anything that flees or withdraws will be running straight into them, which is the classic Tatar tactic. And in my turn, what I do is two things. One is I turn my gun to face them, because now they're actually quite close and I have a chance of doing some damage, which is very, very necessary. Move my dragoons into firing position here, and I move my raiders into basically one line. So this unit moves down, and this is important because I actually want to make this into one unified combat, because I want to make sure that the rabble, with their poor tactical discipline, affects all of this combat, and I think I'll do better than just having the raiders facing these 5 elites on their own. So I kind of pull this together into one big skirmish. Look before we start shooting, and the rabble takes a lot of fire from all of the guns and the salvo, and they take 2 wounds but not 3, and so they actually don't have to test morale, and so they can keep fighting and complete the charge. So at this point I'm a little bit worried about these guys, because they are just musketeers. They're veterans, but they are just musketeers, and facing cavalry in the open is never a good idea. On the right side, however, my case shot does its job. It causes a wound and forces these warriors to taste Death's Morale, and they fail and they actually withdraw disorganized. So this is huge because now my path of retreat is open if I do need it. And on the right side, left side, I charge with my rapiers, and I actually charge the warriors that are here, and they pull back, so they withdraw, and that makes me clip these Capiculu that are in the light woods, but I clip the base that's not in the light woods, which is really important because then I can actually fight, again, infantry in the open, which is hugely to my advantage. I take a lot of shooting from the Capiculu in close range, and this is where my luck holds because I do take some wounds, but not enough to test, and so I don't have to. Actually, no, I do lose a base. I did have to test, but I kept the charge. All right, the Wall of Tatters joins fight. Joins the fight, and they smash into my rapiers. And on this side, the Tatter Warriors expand their frontage because it's in their second move. And here, let's start from left to right. So on the left, I fight the Capicula and I win quite handily. They withdraw disorganized. I pursue them 5 centimeters and fight them again. And now that they're disorganized in the forest, that's basically no chances for them. Bonus action shot. And they break and flee. So that's not surprising. They lose a base and run away. So that side is cleared, and these guys are now standing. And they're too far from the warriors to engage them, which is fine. But the site is cleared. I'm very happy about that. In the center, the rabble whiffs all of their rolls. My veterans do actually really well. They get, I think, a wound, and so they end up taking out a base, which now makes them not be outnumbered. And the warriors lose combat, but they make their test, so they just withdraw in good order. But the infantry is spared, which is huge. I was really worried about them just getting steamrolled. And on the right side, this combat goes into we both fight, and the armor really helps out because I end up winning it quite handily, and so the rabble flees, but the elites pass and they withdraw actually in good order, and I pursue with my three rapiers, and they win that engagement as well, and the elites withdraw disorganized. So this was a very important victory because now these guys are in the right place, and they pushed back 2 units. One of them is fleeing, one of them is disorganized, so that side opened up nicely. And in the firing after movement phase, the case shot opens up again and causes another wound, causes a test, and these warriors now fail again and they flee. So they had that really not successful ambush mission where they sprung their ambush, ran around the forest, didn't expect the gun, ate a whole bunch of case shot at close range, panicked, and fled. And another shot at the center. And this is where the other new rule for this scenario comes in. So this is end of turn 4, and we're now considering breaking points or motivation. And because my opponent has all of those bases fleeing, right? So he has this unit's fleeing, the rabble is fleeing, the warriors that were ambushing are fleeing, plus all the bases he lost, actually pushes him over the edge. So now his army is broken or demoralized, and so the remaining units have to test. And so these warriors test, and they also fail, and now they're fleeing. And the way the rules are written is once your army is broken, you can't rally units. So these units will not rally. They're done with the game. And at the end of the turn looks like this. The other units pass, so the warriors pass, the elites pass, these Capiculu pass, but this rabble is fleeing and it will not rally. And so basically that's that for the Tatter Force being able to effectively cause damage. So in turn 5, the units that were fleeing keep fleeing. My opponent moves his elites onto behind the hill, get them out of the way from the rapiers. And in response, I move my returns on the left side to the Yasser because I want to liberate it. It's poor captives. And then I push my infantry onto the hill and push my raiders onto the hill because there's a couple of turns left, and so I'm pretty sure I can take it, no problem. Bit of a close-up. And the left side. And at the end of the turn, I do free the Yasser because he doesn't have anything defending it, and so some of the captives are freed. And we keep rolling for morale, and the rabble passes, and the elites pass, but the warriors on the hill, they fail, and so they also now flee up the hill, leaving it empty, which means that my bases take it, and so the center hill is mine as well. And that's the end of turn 5. And then we played a super fast turn 6 where my opponent basically couldn't really do anything, but I didn't have enough time to take that final hill on the right side either because I was out of position. And one last shot of the dragoons on the left side with my foot commander. And that's it. The outcome is a Swedish victory, with because I had the 2 hills and then routed much of his army. Okay, so now some thoughts about this game. And now keep in mind that these are first impressions. This isn't super carefully thought about after many games. So this is just played one game, and this is kind of what it felt like and what I think. So starting with the new Reconnaissance Phase, I really like the ideas behind it. Now I don't know how it works in practice over many games. There's some feedback I saw that it gets kind of weirdly tedious, repetitive, and it's kind of confusing. But the thing I like about it is that it's a little bit of an organic start to the game, and there's something there that I think should be kept. So if they change it, if they tweak it, that's great, but I do like something about the way what it adds to the game. And I also really like that with the new reconnaissance rules, both sides get to spend the points. I think this is a huge improvement over the one side always feeling like it never gets to play in the reconnaissance phase. So the fact that even if you have 2 or 3 or 4 reconnaissance points, you can do something with them, I think is really cool. I like the size. It's a nice step up from skirmish. So as I said, a skirmish force that's like a full skirmish force is, I think, you can probably field a task force, but it's not that satisfying. So you have to add a couple of units. But the nice thing is that you can add it 1 unit at a time and keep playing with them. And then by the time you fill out your task force, you basically have a division. Because here, this is like, if I thought about this force as a division force, I have basically a pretty decent infantry regiment, starting of a Rater regiment here and another Rater regiment here. So that's kind of 3 regiments with some dragoons for scouting, and so not much more is needed to make this into a real division. So it's a really nice stepping stone between skirmish and divisions. So I think for that from that perspective, it works really, really well. The new motivation mechanic is, again, first impressions is I like it for 2 reasons. One is it means that the games don't have to grind till the end. Like there is a way to kind of shatter your opponent's army sooner. But the nice thing is that even after the shatter point, you're still in the game. So for example, here my opponent shattered in turn 4, but he still prevented me from taking this last hill because he had some units on there and I couldn't quite take it in 1 or 2 turns. And you can still fight. It's just that your army starts to fall apart, and you have a chance to, for example, shatter your opponent back, but it's just more difficult. So overall, I think it's pretty good. It does, however, mean that charging with all your units at the same time is more risky, because this idea of this like one glorious turn where you had to charge here and you had to charge here and then I charge my opponent here, with all of these 3 fights being losses for my opponent, that's what put his army over the edge. Now if it was only 1 or 2 of these at the same time, let's say these 2, it would have been maybe different, and maybe he wouldn't have actually shattered his army, which means that he could have been rallying the units. And so the idea of putting everything into 1 turn is actually it's interesting because it's more risky. So if it goes well, you can win. If it goes poorly, you lose. But that's kind of cool. And Next thing is the supply mechanic. Is again, first impression is it's interesting. I like that idea that you can't just max out your force with all of the best with no penalties, because having to take these supply wagons that don't do anything is kind of fun, and just the fact that the supply is limited, so you can't, for example, have like armor, arquebuses, and heavy guns at the same time. It's just not possible. Is nice, and it works much better than having just text saying that only so many bases can be upgraded with this or that. It's like if you have the supply, you can buy armor. If you don't, you can't, and it's really straightforward. But of course, the best part is just getting to play with units you don't see on the tables too frequently. So like the Tatar infantry was really fun, and just how crazy effective they were was fun. And there you have it. So the new TaskForce rules are pretty cool. I'm quite excited about it. So I think they're a nice twist to the game, and I'm looking forward to playing more games with them. Hope you enjoyed this. See you next time.